What's up, y'all? So it's Boone here, and I wanted to make this video specifically talking about rental properties, but not the typical average rental property method. So a lot of times people don't want to get into real estate because not because the real estate isn't great, but because they have limiting beliefs. So what I mean by limiting beliefs is they think the only way to get into real estate is to buy a property and rent it out. And I got to rent out to a regular tenant, and then when you hear the word tenant, it automatically gives off these scares like, oh man, I gotta kick somebody out, or somebody's not gonna pay the rent, or this or that. And it gives it this negative outlook because, to be honest with you, that happens very few times. Like what happens is somebody may hear a story from their uncle, their aunt, their friend that said, yo, I bought a property, and as soon as I got it, the person lived in there for 2 months and they end up not paying rent anymore. They had one property and it happened to them one time. But you talk to somebody that has multiple properties, that doesn't happen as often as you think. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. Out of all the houses I have, I haven't had a whole bunch of tenant problems. Yes, I have had tenant problems, but when you weigh the whole thing, let's say you got 10 houses, 8 of them are fine, and then 2 of them have issues. You see it outweighs the bad. It's just the bad just so happened to happen on that first person's first time, which messes up everything. But when you look at the overall picture, it doesn't happen as much as you guys think. But for you, that's like, I just don't want to deal with regular tenants. All you do have other options that you can do. You do not just have to go regular rent. You can go private rent, like I just said, where you just rent to a tenant privately. You can go Section 8 when you go ahead and utilizing the Section 8 program where people are paying, the government is paying for the tenant to stay there. Let's say the tenant may rent maybe $1,000. The government may be paying $800, maybe paying a portion, or maybe paying the whole thing. So that way the money is more guaranteed, but you still have to deal with that tenant. The third thing is you also have other things like veterans housing, and you have other programs. For example, there's one program that I can't mention on this episode specifically, but there's one program that one of my tenants works with through their job where the actual company pays their rent. So he doesn't have to worry about paying rent. They pay for the whole rent through the program that he's in with his job. So there's not always just regular tenants, and it's not just Section 8. Then you have another thing that you guys can do, which if you don't want to do specifically regular rents or dealing with regular tenants, you can do something called midterm. Midterm is basically when someone's staying for a month or more. So if someone's there for, like for example, we do midterm rentals and we utilize websites called VRBO and we use websites called Furnish Finders. So VRBO and Furnish Finders. So VRBO first and foremost is like Airbnb, but they had to stay for at least a month or more. So Airbnb is someone staying a day or 2 or 3. VRBO is someone staying for at least 30 days. So we have multiple apartments where we utilize these platforms and people stay for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. Some people even stay for a year. And it's not always because, hey, I just need to stay somewhere for a night or two or something bad happened. Sometimes, like for example, one of our tenants, their property was getting renovated and it was getting full gut renovated. It was going to take about 6 months or about 4 months. So they basically stayed with us for those 4 months, and then the contractor needed more time. So they bumped it up another 2 months. So they stayed at our place for several months while their house was getting worked on. It didn't mean that they were homeless. It didn't mean that they didn't have any money. It didn't mean like a lot of things people think is because their primary house was getting fixed up and they needed somewhere to stay for the time period while the house was getting fixed up. We had another situation where people homes may have caught on fire and made something bad happen. They need somewhere to stay until their new home is situated. Then you have some people that are traveling nurses where they're coming in to be in this base in this area to go ahead and work at this hospital, and they want to be somewhere close by the hospital where they can go and stay at. Those are traveling nurses. I even had a guy stay at one of my places where he was a truck driver, but he was based to work in this area for some reason, and all his routes was close by. So he lived in this state, but he came down here to work for 3 months doing routes in this area. So he needs somewhere to stay for those 3 months while he was doing those regional routes around this area. So it's multiple different reasons why people need to stay at your home. So don't think that I am just locked in on regular rents and that's what I have to deal with. The other piece is when you do midterm rentals or nightly rentals, you can often charge a lot more than you would with just a regular tenant. The downside is they're not staying there forever. So if someone's staying for 3 months, you're going to have to find someone new in 3 months. but you can charge way more than you would just a regular tenant. So it's pros and cons with this. The con is there's going to be a higher turnover rate because they're only staying for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, things like that. But the other pro part is that you could charge a whole lot more. Here's the other hack and what we do. Sometimes we had this one person where they literally had moved out of their home. Their lease was up somewhere else, but they were, for whatever reason, they could not move into the place that they wanted to in time. So they said, hey, I just need a place to stay for a month, or I think it went 2 months, probably a month, where they need to stay at my place while they're getting situated to find their new place they want to stay at. They came here for a month, and what we did was we reached out to them and said, hey, look, how's your stay going? They said, great, everything is amazing. And we just let them know, like, hey, I know you're looking for other places. That's the reason why you're here. This is just a place filler until the new place is situated. But we're open to you staying here long term because we're liking how things are going. You paid on time. You paid the money. Your background, everything is cool. And you didn't mess up anything. Everything is seeming good. We don't mind going ahead and extending this into a permanent stay. So now we went and offered them a discount on the rent. But here's the whole thing. The rent was higher than what the regular rent was going to be from the beginning. So if the regular rent for a property is, let's say, $1,300, we were charging them $1,700 to stay there. So we would say, hey, instead of $1,700, and you decide to become a long-term staying tenant, we would take it from $1,700 down to $1,600. So now they're like, oh, shoot, I was cool with the $1,700, but now I'm getting a discount. Yeah, for sure. I'll just cancel my search and I'll just stay with you guys. Everything makes sense. But even though they're thinking they're getting it, which they are getting a $100 discount, but we're still making more than what we would get by putting on the market as a regular rent. So there's a lot of hacks. There's a lot of things that you can do. And I'm putting this video together because I want you guys to understand that you don't have to just work with regular tenants and put it up there the traditional way that people have been doing for decades and centuries, the regular way. You can utilize other platforms, other websites, other services, other techniques, other strategies. And that's some of the things that you guys can do. Also think about how you can turn one of your units or your building or anything that you have into maybe a business. And what I mean by business, where some people go ahead and do and turn their place into, like, for example, where our podcast studio is my building. I just gutted the building and turned it into a studio. So now what I will be making for regular rent inside of this building, I make more doing the podcast. So now it makes sense for me to go ahead and convert and utilize this as a podcast studio because the regular rent was going to be here, but the money we generate from the podcast is more than that. So now it makes more sense. So I want you guys to start thinking outside the box. We are in a new day. We are in a new time. We are in a new age. The regular rents, it's nothing wrong with that. I have a bunch of tenants, regular rents, but also think about other platforms, other strategies, other ways to think outside the box so you can generate more income. And also you have the flexibility. Like, for example, the podcast, I can close this up and just put this whole podcast in a whole nother building and then just go back to regular rents here. I have the freedom to move how I want to move when it comes to this. When it comes to our VRBO, furnished finder models, when the tenant 3 months or 2 months or 5 months or 6 months is up, I can just get up and just change models and go back to regular rents or do whatever I want to go ahead and do. Or I can just say, hey, once they're done, I'm going to just sell the building. I have more options to do what I want to do versus when you just have regular rents. I'm not saying regular rents are bad, but for you guys that are watching this that's against regular rents or scared to do regular rental properties, you do have other options. So make sure you make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed this video. But like I said, the main thing is I want you to think outside the box. I understand you have more options. So don't be scared to get into real estate. Just think of real estate. Think of different ways to make it work for your situation.